The Dores must handle the burden of being heavy favorites versus Ball State.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode, well, we look at the keys to victory for Vandy, what they must do, sticking with your identity, play a clean game, all of that stuff. But the main thing to make any of that stuff happen is that Vandy has to handle the burden of being heavy favorites versus Ball State. If they can't do that, none of the other stuff will even matter. So we look at the keys to the game because this is new territory for Vandy. I don't think they've ever been 26.5 point favorites against any FBS team that they've played in quite some time. I don't even think they were that heavy favorites against Hawaii last year, or even the year they beat them 62-10. I don't think they've been north of 20 point favorites in any game that they've played, because they were only 10 point favorites against Georgia State earlier this year. Same team, or same Vandy team. So this is new territory, I think, for Vandy. And so they've got to really be able to handle it. But there's other things that must happen. We're going to talk about the keys to the game, but that's the main thing, right? So when you're heavy favorites, here's the pitfalls to being heavy favorites, and here's how they're gonna fight that. So being heavy favorites comes with, a possibility of, kind of like feeling yourself a little too much, being a little bit cocky, thinking you could just roll out there and say, hey, we're Vandy. Yeah, we beat Alabama. We beat Kentucky on the road. Yeah, we can handle you, Ball State. And that kind of mindset with a team like Vandy, who's just they're not there to where they can think like that in these games, like a Texas or a Bama or a Georgia or Tennessee or even a Florida, any of these SEC teams that's been super successful in the last decade. They have a little bit more leeway in these heavy favorite games, kind of having that mentality and still being able to go out and take care of business the way they need to take care of business. Vandy's not quite there yet. They thought they were going into Georgia State, and they ended up getting beat. They didn't handle the road environment very well. They didn't handle the fact that they were perceived, or they perceived themselves to be significantly better than Georgia State, and instead they should have been offended that they were only 10-point favorites in that game, and I think the line even went down to like 8.5 at some point. But they ended up losing, and they just didn't handle it very well. So in this game, that's the number one key, is to be able to say, hey, we are heavy favorites. We need to start fast. We need to show the world that, hey, the last 2 weeks, 3 if you want to count the last 3 games. If you want to count the Missouri game as kind of like the start to the gateway to beating Alabama and the gateway to beating Kentucky, sure, throw that in there. But they have to prove that these last 2 weeks especially have not been a fluke. And if they go out there and lay an egg against Ball State, then those last 2 wins are all for naught, because now getting to a bowl game seems to be extremely difficult. And then the confidence hit that your team will take after losing a game like that will be immense. So this is something that when you look at and when you evaluate this game, you have to say, all right, you have to come out and act like you are, 2-point favorites or even underdog. You have to treat this game like you've treated the last 2 weeks. You come out on fire, you come out with something to prove, and it should take care of itself, because talent-wise, ability-wise, yeah, that line is that way for a reason. It's 26.5 points for a reason, because the talent gap between these two teams is quite significant at this moment. And with Diego Pavia, they can jump out to a big lead just like that. With this defense, the way it plays, the style it plays, and some of the guys they have on that side of the ball, they can jump out just like that. And if they play like they're capable of playing, then it shouldn't be a problem. You stop the run, guard the tight end, do not let them get going in the passing game, try to limit their yards. Play to your identity, right? Play to your identity on defense, meaning you make them earn every single yard and you make them earn every single first down. If they're going to score any points on you, you make them grind the ball down the field to get those points. You don't give them anything with stupid penalties or giveaways or missed opportunities on takeaways, whatever the case may be, blown coverages. You don't give them those big chunk plays, those big explosive plays. You've done a phenomenal job the last 3 games in doing that. You didn't finish the Missouri game, but you've done a great job of limiting what they do explosively the last 3 games. And it almost got you 3 wins. So those are the kind of things you have to focus on in this game, because we could break down Ball State and we could say, okay, well, if they win this matchup, but it's not about that. Okay. In a game like this, when you're 26.5 point favorites, it's not about that. It's being able to handle the fact that you are 26.5 point favorites over somebody. That team is not as good. And the chance to come in not quite as fired up to play in this game is high. And when those things arise, it leaves yourself vulnerable for an upset or a letdown. Okay. And Vandy's good enough to where if they let down, they could still possibly win this game, even if they have those letdown moments, but they can't, right? You don't want to chance that, because a Mike New team is scrappy. They're going, if you give them a chance, they're going to take it. Okay. So you can't give them that chance. You got to come out. You got to play clean. You got to play focused, right? That's the next point. Okay. Play a clean game to your identity on both sides. Right. And that means, and that kind of furthers this point, right? Handle being heavy favorites by playing a clean game and playing to your identity. If you play to your identity and you play to your standard on both sides of the ball, then everything should be okay. All right. No stupid penalties, no giveaways, no missed opportunities on takeaways. Control the field, control the clock like you've always done. Control, right? Do what you've always done. Do not get out of character, okay? Now, at the same time, you want to develop some things within your offense and your defense. You want to develop elements of both of those sides of the ball, and you can certainly do that. This is a good opportunity to do that. But play within your identity. Don't change. Don't go drastic like, hey, we're 26.5 point favorites. We can go and sling the ball all over the yard, right? Don't think that just because you need to develop a passing game at some point. Don't think that you have to do it all in this game, because you don't. You do need to find some answers, but you don't need to get them all just right in this game, okay? But you just need to focus on being able to play every game you can, focus, because for Vandy, for this team to win, for this team to go to a bowl game like I predicted, okay, I want to remind you of that, for this team to go to a bowl game, to win enough games to go to a bowl game, you need 2 more wins, right? You have to play clean. You have to start every game fast. You do not have room to start slow. You do not have room to leave the door open for a team like Ball State. You don't have the room for that, okay? You just don't. So you got to play clean. Stupid penalties cannot happen. Pre-snap penalties, stupid things like ineligible men downfield, illegal motions, illegal shifts, because I know Vandy's going to work on – I know Tim Beck's offense is going to work on shifting and pre-snap motions and developing that aspect of it, right? You got to have good, clean exchanges, whether it's center quarterback or in the option game with the mesh. And you've got to be able defensively to understand, read your keys, and don't get into a scenario where you're playing hero ball, because it can be very tempting to get in there and play hero ball and say, hey, we're just flat out better, and we're just gonna blitzkrieg and we're gonna make plays because we're better. And they're gonna the fundamentals are gonna go, the technique is gonna go, the assignments are gonna go. Therefore, yeah, you're making plays, but you're not playing clean, so you're developing bad habits. All those things are possible pitfalls with being favored like they are by 26.5 points. All those things can happen. Vandy, if they want to show that they're improved, if they want to show that this is not a fluke, you play like you played against Kentucky. You played like you played against Alabama, right? Clean, crisp, with a purpose all the time. And that's it. All right. And that's how you're going to fight this, even with the backups in. Like, it doesn't mean like if you get up by 24 points and you've got Nate Johnson and you've got some of these backup receivers that haven't never seen the field and Monty Jones and whatever, just because you have them in doesn't mean, doesn't mean you can say, okay, well, the first string guys, they played clean, so we're good, right? They've got to come in and they've got to develop that too. Right. And that's how that's going to happen. Well, and that brings me to my next point, which we'll talk about next, is developing that depth, because they got to find some guys down the line, especially a quarterback. So they've got to get to a point where they can do that to the best of their ability. So we'll get to that next. Okay, here we go, guys. Sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. Hims provides access to treatments that can help you last longer. Stay hard. Giving you the boost and confidence that you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. So Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. That's pretty dope. The process is 100% online, and there's no need for uncomfortable doctor visits. So just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. These products are mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on the product and subscription plan. All right, welcome back. Segment number 2. Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. If you need a second listen, here's some options. So listen up. Get your little notepad out. Get your pen. Get your notepad out. Here we go. Locked On SEC, Locked On Ole Miss, Locked On Auburn. You could switch over. If Locked On had a Ball State channel, you probably go listen to that. You can go outside the conference, listen to Locked On ACC. Those guys had me on at the beginning, back in the summer. That was a lot of fun. There's plenty of good options on the Locked On channel. Whatever you want, they have. So go check it out. Anyway, we're talking keys to the game, man. We're being heavy favorites, being able to handle that is paramount. And to do that, you have to play clean into your identity on both sides. That should help take care of that at all. But the next thing you need to do in a game like this, if you can handle being heavy favorites, and if you can jump out to a big lead, and if you can give yourself plenty of cushion to be able to do this, developing depth in these type of games is outstanding. Okay, these are the type of games where you can do that. These are the type of games where you can give your starters a break. You should be able to give your starters a break. You should be able to get your backups in. You should be able to play at least 3 quarterbacks in games like this, and really get those guys some meaningful reps in games. So, like a Nate Johnson, if you think he's going to truly be your backup quarterback, if something happens to Diego, then you have to get him in this game. You have to find a way to get him in this game, and in order to do that, it can't be a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. It just can't. Right? You can't be in a situation to where you're fighting for a win here, where you're fighting in the fourth quarter going, oh, crap, it's 28-24, and Ball State is driving, and we have to stop them, right? Because you need guys down the road, because like Miles Capers gets hurt, next guy up, right? And that whoever it happens to be, you need to be able to trust that there's not a ton of drop off from Miles Capers to the next guy in line, right? And to ensure that, game reps are important. Obviously, practice is important as well. But you have to be able to ensure that they're going to get the quality reps that they need to be able to develop in those situations, because they have to see game reps. They have to see, from the quarterback perspective, they have to see coverages in real time. They have to see other Division I college athletes running these coverages that they don't know, that they're not privy to ahead of time. Like with practice, I feel like it's a little bit cooked because they know the coverages, and so they can anticipate better, and they're obviously going to look better in practice. But, in a game situation, like they're trying to blitz you, they can hit you. That's a difference. And so you've got to be able to manage these situations and get your team down the field effectively. And if you can't do that when they're trying to hit you and they're flying all around and they're switching up coverages, disguising looks, showing blitz on the left and actually bailing out and coming from the right, things like that teams are going to try to do in a game scenario where you're not going to get at practice, that you got to be able to manage those type things. And in order to manage those type games, you've got to get in the game. In order to get in the game, the starters have to take care of business. Okay. And so if I'm a backup in practice this week, which I've heard Clark Lee said that Vandy had a really good practice, I'm pushing these guys, right? I'm pushing these guys because, hey, if I can keep these guys sharp, I'm going to get my opportunity as a second stringer, third stringer, right? Right? Monty Jones should be chomping at the bit to get some significant carries in this game, right? Because Cedric Alexander, AJ Newberry, we know what they can do. They need to get their work, and Vandy needs to get that lead up so that your down the line guys can get in. Like, these receivers have to have these reps, because at some point you're going to need Darian Wiley. At some point you're going to need Loic Foungy. Those guys aren't playing right now because it's just not the right scenario for them. There's something that's not happening. There's something that they're missing. There's things that they're missing. So you have to be able to get them in a scenario to where they can actually contribute. So that's kind of where we're at on the depth perspective, right? And they've got to be able to come in and prove that they can play a focused, clean game as well, right? And none of it's all the full team focus. Special teams has got to be sharp. Offense has got to be sharp. Defense has got to be sharp. If you take care of business, there's no reason you should be in a tight game with Ball State. There's no reason for that. But if you come out there unfocused, thinking, hey, we're here, which that thought should never cross the mind of a Vandy player. Because in the history of Vanderbilt football, I think it was the year was 1920 something, the last time that Vandy was actually here, right? So you've got to manage those expectations, and you've got to say, hey, we're Vandy. We haven't been there in recent memory since they started putting the face mask on helmets, where Vandy's never been here. So we have to be able to handle being a team that's being heavily recognized now, right? Your coach just got named midseason coach of the year. Your kicker just got special teams player of the week. Miles Capers, had a massive play in there. He sustained a massive injury. Diego Pavia continues to do his thing. Cedric Alexander was praised for his blocking ability. Like, those things have got to continue throughout the course of this season, even in a game like this, because, hey, you get to 5-2, you're ranked, and you talk about notoriety. College game day could come to your campus, right? That's a possible reward for playing good football. Okay. So you have to understand that that's how these things work. You have to understand that, hey, the starters have to play clean, and then when I come in, I have to take advantage of my opportunity as well. So that's kind of where we're at there. Developing depth is going to be paramount as the season wears on, because there's a lot of football. And it's a physical league. It's a grueling league that can take its toll on you. And if you don't have quality guys in there that can step in at moment's notice, then you are going to be in trouble. So defense has got to be able to handle the pass game. It says manage the road environment. There's no road environment. That's not coming until later. But you've got to be able to affect their pass game. Like, that's one thing. That's a hole in Vandy's game right now, I think, that they've got to be able to do a better job of, especially against the tight end. So we'll talk about that next. All right, NFL fans, and college football fans at that, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. All right, we are back here. Segment number 3. We're wrapping up the show. We're wrapping up the week here on the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to you everydayers who make all of this possible. Without you guys, couldn't do this day in and day out. I am almost to 500 subscribers. We're getting there. We're so freaking close, right? We're so close. So tell your friends. Hop on before. Well, I don't want to say before it's too late. But get in and enjoy the fun, because this is a ride, guys. Like, when's the last time Vandy football was this relevant? When was the last time that game day was thinking about coming to campus? When was the last time that Vanderbilt had some notoriety? It's been a while since James Franklin left. But, yeah, so this is amazing. So the last bit of our keys to the game is affecting the passing game. Okay. And there's layers to that. Okay. So affecting their passing game is being able to identify within your coverage, hey, what am I responsible for? What are my possible threats? What can the guy that I'm keying on do to hurt me? What is the worst case scenario, right? It's like, if you're a cornerback, obviously the worst case scenario is he takes outside leverage, runs up the field and beats you deep, right? That's worst case scenario. All right. But like, you have to think pre-snap, like, okay, well, based on my leverage, what is the worst thing that can happen to me? And then you have to anticipate that, and then everything else is cake, right? For a safety, keying in on number 2, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? I'm playing off leverage a little bit because I'm a little bit deeper because I'm a safety. What's the worst thing he can do, right? As a guy that's keying in on number 3, usually when you're keying in on number 3, you're also keying in on the run. So the focus is even tighter because, hey, all right, well, okay, if he releases for a pass, okay, what are the worst routes that put me in the worst position from where I'm standing, right? And whether that's a flat route, a stick route, a crossing route to where you have to communicate with the interior guys. Now, whatever that is, you have to be able to identify it. And sometimes I don't think they're always identifying it, or they're not always communicating it properly. So it's one of the two things when a team gets chunk yardage in the pass game, right? Because when Vandy's giving up chunk yardage, those guys are wide open. They're not making plays. They're not, and sometimes the offense just runs a good route concept and really affects you. And that happens. But for the most part, when they're that wide open, it's usually a blown coverage. It's usually a miscommunication. It's usually something that they're not doing. So they have to shore that up. And I think it's just continuing to get reps within Clark Lee's system. I mean, they are 6 games into Clark Lee calling the defense. So like, it's not like they've been in this thing for a long time. So like, some of the knowledge that they have or don't have is still a work in progress, but this is the game to get it right, because you're going to need it for the next 5 after this. you're going to need all the communication you can get. Texas is an explosive team. So in order to limit them, you're going to need all the communication you can get, and you're going to need all the reps you can get. So building quality depth, all that stuff will help aid that process. So that's just affect the pass game. I think they've got to do a better job of that. Also, they do a pretty damn good job of getting to the quarterback. So when you get there, you just got to continue to be able to get them to the ground, and that's key. So, but anyway, those are the keys to the game for Vanderbilt. It's mostly just being able to handle being big favorites and everything that comes with that territory, because that's new territory for Vanderbilt. So that's something that is in the back of every Vanderbilt fan's mind. Is this okay? Because it's like deja vu. It's like it's happened before. It's it's something that has a little PTSD action to it. Where it's like, oh God, we've been not this big of favorites, but we've been big favorites or relatively big favorites and have crapped the proverbial bed, i.e. Georgia State, right? That's still fresh in everybody's mind. So Vandy's got to go out and actually prove that, hey, that was just a aberration. That was just a fluke occurrence, right? That's not going to happen again. So they've got to do that. Now, I have confidence that they can do that, right? Here's some of the picks that I have presented by FanDuel. Okay, FanDuel Sportsbook. We just did an ad read for them. Here we go. FanDuel. Yep, FanDuel right there. Yay, FanDuel. So they provide some lines, and I'm going to make here's my 3 selections that I'm making within the conference. Vandy minus 26.5. I have confidence that they're going to go out there and handle business. I think that against Georgia State, they learned a lot of things. And one of the things they learned is it doesn't matter who you're playing, they can beat you. So they've got to treat this thing like it's Alabama, and they've got to come out and play the right way. So I have confidence that they can do it, and they can cover the spread. All right. Texas A&M. They play Mississippi State. They are 14.5-point favorites. Now Mississippi State is much improved, so some of their lines have gone down. They've had some pretty heavy lines, but this one I think with Texas A&M rising a little bit, they have found a few answers with Mike Elko. I think they're on to something there. I think Mike Elko was a great hire. They just had to get used to the way he did things. They had to get used to the system and all the protocols and all the logistics and just kind of everything that goes with having a new coach. There's an adjustment period, simply put, and they've been in that adjustment period. So they're starting to come out of that a little bit, and they look really good. They already came in super talented, so that wasn't a problem. It was not whether or not, but how fast they could get adjusted to Mike Elko. Because Mike Elko is going to be successful, right? He's been successful as a coordinator there at A&M, so he knows the environment, and he's been successful as the head coach at Duke. And if you're successful at Duke, I feel pretty good because Cutcliffe was successful there, and some guy named Steve Spurrier. I think you guys have heard of him. He coached at Duke. It was his first head coaching opportunity, actually. So he was successful there, and came back to Florida after that. So A&M minus 14.5. I like that. Speaking of Florida, minus 2.5. They're on a little bit of a resurgence. They're playing some good football right now, and they play Kentucky. They host Kentucky. Right now, I have a hard time with Kentucky because they just don't know what they want to do offensively. And I said it all last week that they had no identity offensively. Like, they don't know what they want to do, and they've been struggling offensively to find some consistency. And that was the thing that killed them against Vanderbilt, right? If they had any sort of consistency, Vanderbilt offensively gave them a chance, opened the door for them to be able to win that game because they weren't consistent enough to score enough points to be able to make that game comfortable. So Kentucky had the opportunity. They didn't seize it because I just don't think they know what they want to do or what they have, or it's just odd. Something's off with that offense. They don't it's just like they don't know what Brock Vandegrift's capable of, and they start to kind of figure it out. And I think they're just like, hey, we got to get all this stuff in, and we've got to work on all this stuff. And I don't think they know that they haven't found their bread and butter for sure. So I like the Gators -2.5 here. DJ Lagway now is unabated at the top of the quarterback depth chart there. Unfortunately, thanks to Graham Mertz's season-ending injury, but nonetheless, he has no pressure now, and he can go out there and sling it. And I think Billy Napier's found something there, and this team's playing some good football. So I like them -2.5 at home against Kentucky to get a conference win there. So those are my picks. Take those for what they're take those, leave those, whatever you want to do with them. But those are some games I feel good about, and so it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun weekend. Another action-packed weekend: Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, LSU, Arkansas, also on the slate in conference. And I think there's some other good non-conference games out there as well. That I think Oregon plays later on. As you're probably watching this, they play later on against Purdue. They're a good team in the Big Ten. So there's a lot of good football on this weekend. So enjoy it. Enjoy this Ball State game. Hopefully Vandy can take care of business, get game day here the next week when Texas rolls into town, and we'll see where this team can go. Man, sky's the limit, it seems like, and hopefully they can continue their success within the football world. But hope you have a great weekend. Hope your picks, if you make picks, do well, and we'll see you back here next week for the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Peace.